Dr. Vex Thornblade stood in his pristine medical facility aboard the research station Sterile Haven, but staring at the holographic display with the kind of expression usually reserved for funeral directors or tax auditors. His four eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous tic he'd developed after treating particularly challenging patients. In his 47 years of xenobiological medicine, he'd seen it all. The crystalline beings who shattered if you looked at them wrong, gas-based life forms who literally evaporated under stress. Hell, he'd even successfully treated a sentient black hole's indigestion. But this was different. This was terrifying. The assignment brief floated before him in nauseating detail. Prepare medical facilities for incoming human diplomatic crew. Duration, indefinite. Survival rate, unknown. Unknown survival rate, he muttered, adjusting his 6 medical degrees on the wall for the third time that hour. 47 species successfully treated, and they give me the one with an unknown survival rate. His assistant, Nurse Pip Squeakerton, bounced into the room with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated rubber ball. Pip resembled what would happen if you crossed a jellyfish with a disco ball, and somehow gave it an unnaturally sunny disposition. Oh, wonderful. Are these the humans everyone's been talking about? They sound absolutely delightful. Vex pulled up humanity's medical file, and his stomach acids began churning ominously. Delightful? Pip, look at this. They have something called blood that somehow clots when exposed to air. They literally leak red fluid until it hardens into scabs. That's not delightful. That's horrifying. Ooh, like natural bandages. How clever. And look at this. Vex continued, his voice rising to near hysteria levels. They deliberately make their joints pop and crack for pleasure. What kind of species finds structural failure entertaining? Pip wiggled with excitement, which for a gelatinous being involved a lot more jiggling than most species were comfortable witnessing. Maybe they're like the bubble folk of Sector 7. They love popping too. The bubble folk explode when they pop, Pip. They literally die. It's their reproductive cycle. Vex scrolled further through the file. Oh, and apparently humans sweat when they're worn. They secrete salt water through their skin pores. Their entire epidermis becomes a leaking membrane. That sounds refreshing. Vex stared at his assistant with the kind of look reserved for people who suggest ice cream for breakfast or think reality television is educational. Pip, I need you to understand something. In my professional medical opinion, based on this file, humans are walking biological disasters. They're held together by what appears to be stubbornness and expired warranty cards. The communication panel chimed, and a gruff voice crackled through the speakers. Sterile Haven, this is human transport vessel Lucky Shot requesting docking permission. We've got 2 crew members ready for your standard medical clearance. Vex's primary hands began trembling while his secondary hands reached for his emergency anxiety medication. Standard medical clearance, he whispered. They want standard medical clearance for creatures that voluntarily make their skeletons pop. The airlock hissed open with the finality of a coffin lid, and in walked humanity. Captain Buck Ironwood strutted through first, a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite by someone with a sense of humor and access to power tools. Behind him came Engineer Ruby Sparkwrench, who appeared to have been assembled from spare parts and held together with determination and possibly duct tape. Howdy there, Doc. Buck boomed, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with either engineering or creative cursing. Like ready to poke and prod us like prize cattle? Vex's medical scanner immediately began shrieking alarms. Warning, unknown biological signatures detected. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols. Oh, that's just Buck, Ruby said cheerfully, patting the captain's shoulder. He's louder than our engine core, but mostly harmless. The scanner's alarms grew more frantic. Warning, structural impact detected on unknown specimen. See, this is exactly what I was afraid of, Vex muttered, fumbling with his emergency medical kit. You're already causing structural damage to each other. Please, step away from your injured companion. Buck and Ruby exchanged the kind of look that passes between humans when they realize they're dealing with someone who's never seen a nature documentary. Doc, she just patted my shoulder. That's what humans call friendly physical contact. Physical contact? Vex's voice rose several octaves. You deliberately inflict trauma on each other as a greeting. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds worse than it is, Ruby admitted. Vex began his examination with the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb while blindfolded. Please extend your upper appendages for joint mobility assessment. Buck stretched his arms above his head, and his shoulder produced a satisfying pop that echoed through the medical bay like a gunshot. Every alarm in the facility activated simultaneously. Medical emergency. Joint failure detected, initiating emergency surgical protocols. The facility's AI announced with mechanical panic. "Whoa there, buddy," Buck said, as robotic surgical arms descended from the ceiling. "That was just my shoulder popping. Feels great after sitting in that cramped transport for 6 hours." Vex stood frozen, his medical scanner clutched in his trembling hands. You deliberately caused your joint to fail, and you described the experience as great. Haven't you ever cracked your knuckles? I don't have knuckles. None of my species have knuckles. We specifically evolved away from having body parts that make alarming noises. Ruby's stomach chose that moment to produce a rumbling growl that sounded like distant thunder mixed with a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. The medical facility's AI immediately shifted into overdrive. A parasitic infestation detected. Recommend immediate surgical intervention. Oh, for crying out loud, Ruby sighed. I'm just hungry. That's the sound human stomachs make when they want food. Vex began hyperventilating, which for his species involved rapid color changes across his skin's surface. Your internal organs communicate through acoustic emissions. Pretty much, yeah. Sometimes they're quite chatty. This is a nightmare, Vex whispered. I'm treating patients whose bodies actively rebel against them, and they think it's normal. Buck clapped him on what he assumed was a shoulder, producing another joint pop in the process. Doc, you seem a little tense. Maybe you should try some deep breathing exercises. What's deep breathing? You know, inhale deeply, hold it, then let it out slowly. It really helps with stress. Vex attempted this human technique and immediately began choking on his own respiratory secretions. Pip bounced over to pat his back, which only made things worse. See? Buck said helpfully, as Vex gasped and wheezed. You're already getting the hang of human biology. The next morning brought what Vex would later refer to in his therapy sessions as the incident. Ruby had been working on recalibrating the transport's navigation array when a plasma coupling decided to demonstrate why proper safety protocols exist. The result was a minor cut on her left hand, approximately 2 centimeters long and shallow enough that it would heal without intervention. For a human, this was roughly equivalent to a paper cut from particularly aggressive office supplies. For Dr. Vex Thornblade, this was the medical apocalypse. By the 7 moons of Zephyria. He shrieked when Ruby casually mentioned the injury during their morning check-in. You've been wounded. Why didn't you immediately report this catastrophic trauma? Ruby looked down at her hand with the bemused expression of someone watching their cat try to understand television. Doc, it's just a little cut. Probably won't even leave a scar. Won't leave a scar? Ruby, you're leaking vital fluids. Your structural integrity has been compromised. No. Oh. Vex began frantically pulling medical equipment from every available cabinet. Pip, prepare the emergency surgical suite. We need to stop this hemorrhaging before she expires from fluid loss. It stopped bleeding on its own about 10 minutes ago, Ruby said patiently. Vex froze mid-panic. Stopped, on its own. Yeah, that's what blood does. It clots, remember? Forms a natural seal over the wound. That's the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Your life essence automatically hardens when exposed to atmosphere. The next day, Vex discovered something that would haunt his dreams for months to come. The cut had developed what Ruby casually described as a little inflammation. To Vex's alien perspective, Ruby's hand looked like it was preparing to spontaneously combust. The area around the wound had turned slightly red and appeared marginally swollen compared to the surrounding tissue. Infection. He screamed, dropping his morning nutrition cube. It's spreading. The wound site shows clear signs of systemic contamination. Ruby examined her hand with all the concern of someone checking the weather. It's not infected, Doc. It's just a little inflamed. That's totally normal for healing. Normal? Normal? Your flesh is changing color and expanding beyond its original parameters. How is that normal? Well, inflammation is part of the healing process, increased blood flow, white blood cells fighting any potential infection. That sort of thing. Vex began drafting his will. You're telling me your body deliberately increases fluid pressure and cellular activity at injury sites? Pretty much, yeah. Ruby poked at the slightly swollen area. It's a little tender, but nothing serious. I should probably touch it to see how sensitive it is. The medical scanner Vex had been holding clattered to the floor. You want to, deliberately, touch the inflamed tissue? Well, yeah. How else would I know if it's getting better or worse? By running comprehensive molecular analysis, by conducting non-invasive cellular scans, by doing literally anything other than poking the damaged area with your appendage. Ruby reached toward her hand. No. Vex lunged forward, his forearms windmilling frantically. Don't touch it. You'll make it worse. You'll spread the inflammation. Doc, calm down. It's just a little tender. Watch. She gently pressed the area around the cut. Vex fainted. When he regained consciousness, he found Pip hovering over him with what passed for concern on a gelatinous face. Dr. Thornblade, are you all right? You made a very undignified squeaking noise and then collapsed. She touched it, he whispered, staring at the ceiling. She deliberately made physical contact with inflamed tissue and survived. Humans are remarkably resilient. Pip chirped. Ruby says the inflammation is already going down. Vex sat up slowly, his world forever changed. Going down? The inflammatory response is reversing. Apparently that's what human bodies do. They get inflamed, fight off any problems, then return to normal. They're like biological warriors. In the corner, Ruby was examining her hand with satisfaction. Yep, looks like it's healing up nicely. Should be good as new in a few days. Vex began laughing with the kind of hysteria usually reserved for people who've just realized they've been afraid of butterflies their entire life. Desperate times called for desperate measures, which in the medical community meant calling Dr. Mortimer Slimewhisker. If Vex was the galaxy's second best xenobiologist, Mortimer was the undisputed champion of treating species that actively tried to kill their doctors. His credentials included successfully performing surgery on a creature made entirely of antimatter and somehow managing to give a physical examination to a being that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The holographic projection flickered to life, revealing Mortimer's distinctive appearance. Imagine a cross between an octopus and a filing cabinet, but with the personality of someone who'd spent too much time thinking about medical liability insurance. Vex, my old colleague, Mortimer's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much and billed accordingly. I received your emergency consultation request. Humans, eh? I was wondering when someone would get stuck with that assignment. Mortimer. Thank the stars you answered. Tupo. I'm dealing with a species that deliberately damages their own skeletal structure for entertainment and considers inflammation a normal biological process. I need advice on how to treat beings that are essentially held together by optimism and expired warranties. Mortimer's expression grew somber, which for his species involved his color shifting to a disturbing shade of bureaucratic beige. Vex, I've been reviewing human medical literature for the past 3 years, ever since the Galactic Medical Council flagged them as a potential patient population. What I've discovered has kept me awake through several sleep cycles. Please tell me you have treatment protocols. Treatment protocols. Vex, these creatures have something called a funny bone. It's not actually a bone, it's a nerve that when struck causes temporary paralysis and pain, and they named it funny. Vex felt his anxiety medication wearing off. They find nerve damage amusing? It gets worse. They have a process called sneezing where their respiratory system violently expels air at high velocity to clear irritants. The force can reach up to 100 miles per hour. As if summoned by cosmic irony, Ruby chose that moment to walk past the medical bay. A bit of dust from the ventilation system tickled her nose, and she produced a spectacular sneeze that echoed through the corridors like a small explosion. Both doctors immediately assumed she was dying. Medical emergency. Vex shouted into the communicator. Ruby has experienced some kind of respiratory failure. She just expelled air from her breathing apparatus with tremendous force. I heard that through the communication system, Mortimer said gravely. The acoustic signature suggests catastrophic pressure release in immediate life support procedures. Ruby stuck her head into the medical bay, looking perfectly healthy and slightly confused. Hey doc, you okay? You sound worried. You just expelled air. Violently, Vex stammered. Oh, I sneezed. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. The ventilation system's kicking up dust. Mortimer's hologram leaned forward with the intensity of someone discovering a new species of cosmic horror. You regularly perform this violent respiratory expulsion? Well, yeah, when we need to. It's like a biological reset button for our nasal passages. Both doctors began making notes with the frantic energy of people documenting the end times. And apparently, Buck's voice carried from the corridor. I've got physical therapy scheduled for next week. Doc Martinez says my shoulder mobility needs work after all that time in cramped transport ships. Mortimer's color shifted to what could only be described as medical malpractice lawsuit gray. Physical therapy. They deliberately subject themselves to therapeutic torture? It's not torture, Ruby called back. It's exercise designed to improve joint function and muscle strength. They voluntarily damage their musculoskeletal system in the name of improvement, Vex whispered into the communicator. Vex, Mortimer said solemnly, I'm updating your file to reflect maximum hazard protocols. I recommend immediate evacuation of all humans from your medical facility before they contaminate other species with their casual attitude toward biological trauma. But they seem functional. That's what makes them so terrifying. They're functional despite everything their biology throws at them. It's unnatural, Vex. No species should be that resilient to their own bodily functions. The consultation ended with both doctors agreeing that humans represented either the pinnacle of biological engineering or the universe's most elaborate practical joke. Pip Squeakerton had reached the limits of his patience, which for an eternally optimistic gelatinous being was saying something. After watching Dr. Thornblade spend 3 days treating normal human biological functions like exotic diseases, Pip decided to take matters into his own tentacles. Ruby, he said, bouncing over to where she was reading a technical manual, can you explain human inflammation to me? Dr. Thornblade seems to think it means you're dying. Ruby looked up with the expression of someone who'd been waiting for someone to ask a reasonable question. Oh, finally. Someone who wants to understand instead of panic. Okay, so inflammation is actually a good thing. When your body detects injury or irritation, it increases blood flow to the area, brings in white blood cells to fight infection, and starts the healing process. So the redness and swelling mean your body is fixing itself? Exactly. It's like having a construction crew show up to repair damage. There's going to be some noise and mess, but that's because they're working. Pip absorbed this information with the enthusiasm of someone discovering that their favorite food was actually healthy. And the touching part. Well, you need to assess how the healing is progressing. Is it too tender? Is the swelling going down? Are there any signs of actual infection? You can't tell just by looking. Dr. Thornblade chose that moment to walk by, still muttering about voluntary tissue trauma and deliberately touching inflammation. Dr. Thornblade, Pip called out. Ruby was just explaining that inflammation is actually a healing response, not an injury. Vex stopped mid-mutter. Healing response? Yeah, Buck chimed in from across the room. Same with joint popping. It's not structural failure, it's releasing gas bubbles that build up in the synovial fluid. It feels great and doesn't hurt anything. Gas bubbles? Ruby nodded enthusiastically. And sneezing is just clearing irritants from our nasal passages. It's preventive maintenance, not respiratory failure. Vex stood very still for a long moment, processing this information with the careful attention of someone rebuilding their entire worldview. So, when you said you were hungry and your stomach made noise, my digestive system was just telling me it was ready for food, like a biological reminder system. And when you sweat, temperature regulation, much more efficient than panting or seeking shade. And the blood clotting, emergency wound sealing, prevents infection and fluid loss while healing begins. Vex felt something shift in his understanding, like a complicated equation suddenly resolving into elegant simplicity. You're not falling apart. You're self-repairing. Now you're getting it. Ruby grinned. Human bodies are basically biological Swiss Army knives. We've got built-in solutions for most problems. But what about more serious injuries? Vex asked, his scientific curiosity finally overriding his panic. Buck rolled up his sleeve to reveal a faded scar. Broke my arm in 3 places about 10 years ago. Doctors set the bones, put it in a cast, and my body grew new bone tissue to fix the breaks. Good as new. Your skeleton regenerates? To a degree, yeah. Same with skin, muscle tissue, even some organ function. We're pretty good at bouncing back from damage. Vex sat down heavily, his entire medical worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself. I've been treating the most resilient species in the galaxy like they were made of glass. To be fair, Ruby said gently, we probably do seem pretty weird if you're not used to biological systems that actively fight back against problems. You're not weird, Vex said slowly. You're remarkable. Your bodies don't just passively exist, they actively maintain and repair themselves. You're walking, talking examples of biological engineering at its finest. Pip bounced with excitement. Does this mean we can stop treating every human sneeze like a medical emergency? Pip, Vex said, standing up with renewed purpose. I think it's time we learned what human medicine is really about. 6 months later, Dr. Vex Thornblade stood in his newly renamed Human Biology Research Center, watching Ruby demonstrate proper wound care to a group of fascinated alien medical students. The facility had been completely redesigned to accommodate what he now understood was humanity's refreshingly practical approach to medicine. So when assessing inflammation, Ruby was saying to the assembled students, you want to check for the 5 cardinal signs: redness, swelling, heat, pain, and loss of function. A little of the first 4 is normal and healthy. It's when you get significant loss of function that you need to worry. The qual. One of the students, a crystalline being from the Shard Collective, raised a tentacle. But Professor Ruby, how do you assess pain levels without sophisticated scanning equipment? Well, that's where the touching comes in. Ruby gently pressed the area around a minor cut on her finger. You palpate the tissue to check for tenderness, heat, and any unusual firmness that might indicate infection. Vex watched with pride as his students took notes with only minimal panic. It had taken months of patient education to convince them that humans weren't in constant medical crisis, but were instead examples of biological systems so robust they could afford to be casual about minor injuries. Dr. Thornblade, Pitt bounced over, his perpetual enthusiasm now focused on human physiology. The Galactic Medical Council wants to schedule another presentation of your research. Apparently, 17 different species have requested training in human medical protocols. Excellent, Pip. Make sure to include the section on human exercise physiology. I think the concept of controlled muscle damage for strength improvement still needs more explanation. Captain Buck wandered over, having just finished his daily workout routine, which Vex now understood was a carefully designed system for maintaining optimal physical condition rather than an elaborate form of self-torture. Hey Doc, how's the research going? Buck, I've published 3 papers on human resilience factors, and I'm working on a 4th about the psychological benefits of controlled physical stress. Your species has revolutionized how we think about biological maintenance. Glad we could help. Though I still think you worry too much about minor stuff. As if on cue, one of the alien students approached with a concerned expression. "Dr. Thornblade, I have a question about inflammatory response assessment." "Of course, what's troubling you?" The student gestured toward a small cut on their appendage that showed slight redness. "It's inflamed. Should I touch it?" Vex smiled, remembering his own terror at those exact words just months ago. "Absolutely. Gentle palpation is essential for proper assessment. The inflammation indicates your body's healing response is functioning correctly." The student carefully touched the area, checking for heat and tenderness. "It's slightly warm but not painful. The redness appears to be decreasing." "Perfect assessment. Continue monitoring and remember, inflammation is your friend, not your enemy." As the students filed out, discussing their newfound understanding of biological resilience, Vex reflected on how much his perspective had changed. He'd gone from fearing human biology to recognizing it as perhaps the most elegant example of self-maintaining biological systems in the known galaxy. "You know," he said to Ruby as she packed up her teaching materials, "when I first received the assignment to treat humans, I thought I was being punished for some cosmic misdeed. And now I realize I was given the opportunity to study the most successful biological design in the galaxy. Your bodies don't just survive, they adapt, repair, and improve themselves. It's beautiful in its practicality." Ruby grinned. "Just wait until you learn about our immune system's ability to develop targeted responses to new threats." Vex's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a researcher who'd found his life's work. "I've already started preliminary studies on adaptive immunity. The implications for other species are extraordinary." As the research station settled into its evening cycle, Vex updated his personal log. Day 187 of human biology research. Initial assessment, catastrophically wrong. Revised assessment. Humans represent the pinnacle of biological engineering, combining robust self-repair systems with remarkable adaptability. Personal note. Never again will I fear the phrase "it's inflamed" should I touch it. In fact, I now encourage it. He paused, then added with a chuckle, "Though I still maintain that joint popping is unnecessarily dramatic. Some things about human biology will always seem excessive." In the end, Dr. Vex Thornblade became the galaxy's foremost expert on human medicine, not because he learned to treat their diseases, but because he learned to appreciate their health. And if occasionally he still jumped when someone's stomach growled unexpectedly, well, that was just proof that even the most adaptable systems need time to adjust to new information. After all, he was only alien,